when you are in the company of my learned friend, Mr. Mahesh, you can't be but be young. You have to be young. And I remember my fond and affectionate days with Mr. Ram Jetmalani, who was as young as he was always. And in Pune, he used to be called Ramu Kaka, right? But whenever he used to meet, when he was the Minister for Law and Justice and even otherwise, he used to call me my son. And that was a very fond, close relationship we had, and that continues with my friend Mr. Mahesh. I want to take you, before I talk about lawyers' role, a little global tour and a few ideas which have always traveled with me during my entire journey as a lawyer and what I may call as a social observer. I think when lawyers must be essentially social observers. Law is an essentially social observance tool. Without getting too much into jurisprudence, I think that's how we should look at it. Our country has given to us a great lesson that if there is one revolution which is important for us, is a rule of law as a non-violent revolution. We don't need any other revolutions. But how do we strengthen the rule of law as a non-violent revolution? Is a question that is answered by a wonderful amalgamation of law and how we look at law, how we transform law, and how we deal with the institutions of law and justice. Way back in 1968, when Europe was undergoing a transition, the clash between the West and the East, the socialist promise and the pre-market deliverance, you find students from Sorbonne University in Paris in the streets. In Czechoslovakia and a few eastern parts of Europe, you had students uprising. In our own country, 1970s, we saw the Naxal uprising. They were part of a history which were endeavoring to tell the world that the deliverance can come through one particular ideology. That story has profitably come to an end. Deliverance can no longer come through one particular ideology. Across the world, countries have learned this lesson. And if deliverance and the reordering of a social has to come, it has to come through a merger of a variety of non-doctrinaire perspectives on how do we reorganize our lives. One reason why we need to talk and always talk about engagement of the youth in the organization of ourselves individually and collectively is that it's only through both a wonderful, again, amalgam of individual and collective initiatives that societies can move through a peaceful and orderly transition. When there is no individual and collective coalition, then we have other avenues and methods where society endeavors to change, and they are too dangerous. When I was a student of Loyola College in Madras, studying physics way back in the year 1970s, some of our students came together and set up an association called the Indian Youth Association. And we thought youth alone can save India, because at the time when India was moving towards the transition from an experiment through constitutional reordering, amendments of the constitution, Supreme Court intervening and striking down legislation, so on and so forth. And then the restlessness of the youth to move towards a great egalitarian society which the constitution has promised to ourselves. We thought youth alone can save India. And I'm sure that idea will always remain perennial, that it's not a question of saving, but it's a question of being with India. Unless you are being with India, I don't think you're going to save India. But how are you to be with India? That's why I said, having looked at the dispassionately as a student of history and how world has transformed itself from two highly competing ideologies into a world where we now understand that rule of law is one way of looking at things and only one way of looking at things. And how do we go about it? I don't propose to talk about the deficits of democracy. When Bernie Sanders has been a long time member of the Senate in US, in one of his recent books, he asked the question, who owns democracy? Question seemed to be an oxymoron. But democracy means owned by the people, but are the people owning democracy? And what is that we can do as a youth, as lawyers, to ensure that every citizen in our country owns democracy? And how do we really go about doing that? Very important question. We need more and more debates on these questions. We need more and more engagements on these questions. I conceive that, well, many of us think that some parts of our constitution is a social justice compact, like the part 4 of the constitution, directive principles. But I understand the very idea of a constitution is a social justice idea. In the sense, power is no longer to be exercised by individuals or collectives or institutions at their discretion without being subject to any overwatch or supervision. So when the very idea of a constitution itself is a social justice idea, I think from there on, the journey for a lawyer or Poro would like to ensure that everybody owns democracy, is to see that every part of the constitution really and virtually becomes a vibrant social justice document. Every part of the constitution. When I say that, I don't mean again the way the Supreme Court is trying to look at it from certain entrenched positions of advancing certain ideas and things. I don't look at it. We have a lot of questions on what Supreme Court may or may not do, but it's not the place and the time to talk about that. But are we in a position to now shape by our vibrant, engaged thought processes and debates and discourses to infuse that element of rule of law and adherence to discipline in every aspect of our life into our institutions? So when I talked of deficits of democracy, there are a lot of things that one can talk about it. When you talk about deficits of our institution functioning, whether it is the court or the parliament or even own families, families as an institution, a lot of concerns which each one of us would like to raise and would like to have answers to them. But more importantly, that we look at the space available to us and to create more and more space available to us. I say that because for transforming an institution or an idea or to usher in a new understanding, we can and we must create our own space. Space is not given to us. It has to be occupied by us and created by us. When space is not created by us, we become only mere blind adherence or something or the other happening around us. But when we become active agents of transformation, then we are creating space for ourselves. Gandhiji created a space. The whole idea of Satyagraha is a space creating idea. So we are people who have created space by having visions about how we can enrich the lives of individuals and collectively together. So associations like this, I think, are important. And meeting recently when my young friend Banerjee was there a couple of days ago, we were talking about the importance of culture, the importance and the connection between fundamental duties and fundamental rights and so on and so forth. I narrated in the meeting something which I thought was important to be narrated again and again. When you talk about creating a space, we must create a space where all of us have equal participation. It's not a space I edge you out. And sometimes we have myths about, how democracy functions. We have myths about how participation democracy also happens. Ultimately, at the end of the day, whatever be the institution, each one of us with our own innate, endowed intelligence and our equipment, and coupled with our ability to nurture this intelligence and equipment in the larger social cause, ideas germinate. Ideas germinate from somebody's mind or the other. They don't germinate collectively like, like a leaves in a tree, just about the summer is on, and ideas germinate from individual mind. But when they germinate, but they become part of collectivity. And how do we really receive them, enrich them, improve them, is all what we need to do by this kind of engagements and associations. There are large number of concerns in our community and in our society. All of us are aware of them. And at a global level again, when thinkers, economists, people in public life begin to talk about and ask questions, is liberal democracy the end of history? And whether liberal democracy has probably not to turn any more chapters. You have economies across Europe talking about the need to revisit socialism, the need to question free market and all the important questions being raised. So when we have this kind of association, it's important and more fundamental for us to keep asking questions which must disturb us, not questions which peace us. So if we don't ask questions which do not disturb us, we're not really in the process or the path of rule of law, non-violent revolution. And I must say, as an officer of this country, with an passport to enter into the way the government is working, I am beginning to learn statecraft the way I would have never known. And I must say, to the credit of this government, not because of any particular party, the inconceivable commitment and the extraordinary commitment of people working in the government to do things which are unthinkable and to achieve things which are, of Himalayan heights. I say great things are happening in the government. And if only we are not disruptive in our attitudes, but more willing to lend and each and every minute of our time and our lives, energies, I'm sure we'll be able to see more of them. There's no need for an ideological clash here. It's only important to focus on what every one of us can do as part of each and every part of the working of the government and part of the institution of justice, and beyond that, as part of this wonderful nation. One can talk about this wonderful nation. We are inheritors of a certain sense of importance of understanding of life and its meaning, which no other country has given to us. When I say that, I don't talk from any hegemonical point of view. I say so because this country has produced and will continue to produce this very unique understanding of life and how do we live as a community and as a people. From north to south to east to west, thousands of years, people have lived together in wonderful ways. And how do we continue to enable this way of living together in more than wonderful ways? I think sure is a task before us. And engagements of the association like this will certainly throw a lot of gather a lot of a helping environment in the universities and colleges. So let us be leaders, and in a sense, as I said, to come back to it, I believe strongly there's one important revolution, unfinished revolution, is rule of law as a non-violent revolution. It's very important to understand the implications. Please engage yourself in this great task and celebrate being part of our nation. Thank you so much.